Historic events are taking place, and no one would have expected that all of a sudden there might have been a ceasefire. Joining me today is Pastor Robert Stearns, who is the founder of Eagles Wings Ministries, and not a newcomer to Israel. Thank you for taking the time with me here at the Media Line.
No, it's an honor to be with you, Felice, and this incredible organization on this very historic day.
Pastor Stearns, the power of prayer. That's what kept going through my mind. You just had this phenomenal event, bringing influencers. You're all about bringing people here to pray for the state of Israel. This happens. As a matter of fact, the release will be on the holiday day at which the hostages were taken. The horrific massacre took place. What are you thinking?
First of all, it's amazing to sense really the euphoria in the country. I mean, there's just this sense of expectation and joy. You know, they haven't been quite released yet, but it really seems that it's happening. So you feel that in the air everywhere. And I think this issue of prayer, I mean, Jerusalem's gift to the world has been the gift of prayer, the gift of praise, right? Which really is the gift of hope. King David, the Psalms, you know, that we can lift our lives from the mundane, from the difficult, from the painful, and we can hope for something better, and we can believe in a good God who is working in the midst of our pain. And so to be here, we had over 1,000 people gathered together at the Tower of David from, I think, about 15 nations. And there was this intense prayer. And now for 48 hours later, this release to come and this news to come. And my understanding is that President Trump is on his way here. You know, there is this sense of thank you, God. And may we continue to hope, and may we believe that this is the first step towards deeper regional peace in this part of the world.
It's a very complex situation. There's nothing simple about putting together a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas, a terrorist organization. There'll be a release of thousands of people that have blood on their hands. And there is a fear amongst people that it'll happen again. When people come to you about prayer and about something so hard to swallow, what do you say?
You know, it's very interesting. One of the things I was thinking today, when President Trump was elected the first time, the New York Times contacted me, and they were going to run op-eds about Trump's plan for moving the embassy to Jerusalem. And they were having someone write against this plan and someone to write an op-ed for it. And they asked me if I would write that. And Felice, I was vilified. I was attacked. This was a call for war. This was a call for bloodshed, et cetera, et cetera. And what happened? The Abraham Accords, the greatest step toward normalization possible. And so then we look, after the Abraham Accords, you had this pendulum swing, and you have Hamas be empowered, you have Iran be empowered, because they don't like the fact that there's any kind of normalization in this part of the world. So what do we look at today? You're absolutely right. There is nothing simple about this region or these talks, these negotiations, this proposal. At the same time, it's the most simple thing in the world, because one side is emphasizing life and peace and a path forward for all, and another side is emphasizing death to the Jews, death to Israel, and enslavement under Sharia law. So it's hard to keep both those realities in your mind at the same time. In one way, this is very simple. This truly is modernity and coexistence against, you know, barbarism. On the other hand, yes, we have to deal with complex negotiations and a lot of complicated details. And that's why this isn't easy, but I applaud this first step. Somebody asked me today, they said, well, what do you think? Is this a good thing, a bad thing? And I said, listen, we can hope that it's the best thing, but I can say this for sure. What what we had before was not working. We needed something to shift. And so let's believe that this is a first step toward a better hope and a better future.
Nothing in this region goes simply. And if you look at just the past year of trying to understand what happened with Iran and how far Israel and America got in terms of Iran and taking out the nuclear arms, nobody's quite clear on exactly what's happening, but we do know it can happen again. When you are speaking to the vast Christians that you do you hear from them a concern about Iran? Do you hear a concern from them about what's happening with Hamas? Do they care?
I think that a growing number of Christians are waking up. I think that, so we have to speak of this in two ways. We have to think about American Christians, but our ministry is global. I just came back from Jakarta, Indonesia. A few months before that, I was in Nigeria. On a global level, I think the world is aware of the threat of a radicalized Islam that is enabled by cultural Marxism. I think globally, the Christian church understands that threat. I think American Christianity is just waking up to that. Because American Christianity has had the luxury of not being persecuted, not really being attacked the way our Nigerian brothers and sisters are, our Sudanese brothers and sisters are, our Syrian brothers and sisters are. But I think finally there is a growing number of American Christian leaders. I think of our friend Troy Miller at the National Religious Broadcasters and others who are really leading the way, Michelle Bachman, Tony Perkins, leading the way and educating the church. And that's why Eagles Wings brings pastors here, lets them see and experience this firsthand on the ground, because then they become a voice in their pulpits. And so it's not enough, but it is beginning, and that gives me hope.
At the same time, Pew came out with a study looking globally at 36 countries, and there are many who grew up in the Christian faith that are walking away from it more than are coming back. How do you deal with that?
I don't know when that study was done. I'm not questioning the veracity of that study, but I will say anecdotally, especially among young people in America right now, there's wonderful spiritual renewal on college campuses, in large youth movements. I think that the materialism and the individualism of the Instagram, TikTok age is kind of running its course, and young people are looking for something deeper. They're looking for something that is more rooted, more grounded, more community-based. So I do think that there's an opportunity for spiritual renewal. I don't doubt those statistics, but I think that spirituality is a multi-dimensional reality. And people can be leaving a traditional church while at the same time undergoing personal spiritual renewal.
Americans are not very good at geography, and it's actually part of what you were talking about. They don't really study it the same way, except maybe my kids did, but honestly, they really don't. And looking at what you had just stated is that Europeans may be a little more attuned to what's happening in the region, and Americans are catching up. The education system in the United States, in terms of these issues, and it does come back to that, is why is Israel important to the United States? Why is it important to some youth to understand not just your taxpayer dollars, and also not from just a spiritual standpoint, that it is important to the value of your life? Teaching the way you have, and you're a teacher as well. When you take young kids, and I think people start too late today, what are the first things, what are the basics that young people should be getting that they're not getting that would shift their sense of why is Israel important?
Well, let me answer that by respectfully challenging or correcting one sentence you said. I wouldn't even say, why is Israel important to America? I would say, why is Israel important to the free world?
Well, that's true.
So that, that's really where I would present it. That a world where the Jewish state of Israel cannot exist in security is a world I wouldn't want to live in. This tiny little nation that is not a perfect nation, that has a lot of problems, but manages to somehow coexist with the ultra-Orthodox of Mea Shearim and the gay pride parade in Tel Aviv together in the same country. This is a country that allows for individual freedoms. This is a country that allows for pluralism. This is a country that allows for all of those expressions. And to me, Felice, this comes back to this. This comes back to every human being is created in the image of God. Jew, Christian, Muslim, Druze, Baha'i, Buddhist, Hindu, whoever you are, we have the image of God, the imago Dei, in each of us. And so this isn't about forcing belief onto someone, but this is about saying, are we going to live in a culture, in a society, in a world that says every person should be treated with a level of respect and dignity? And to me, that is what Israel is fighting for. And that's why I think that the message has to get out, yes, to America, but really to the whole world. Let me say one more thing. I just returned from Indonesia, and I was so encouraged because right now, Israel and Indonesia, they don't have, diplomatic relations, and Indonesia has a massive Muslim population. But I found, and I think you saw it at the UN, when the Indonesian, forgive me, I don't know if it's prime minister or president, but the leader of Indonesia got up and said, hey, Israel deserves to dwell in security because Indonesia, though it is home to the most Muslims in the world, Indonesia is scared of radical Islam. Indonesia is, so many Muslims that I met there told me how concerned they are, even within their own society, about this. And so this is why Israel is important to the whole world.
It brings me to my next question, and it's tied to anti-Semitism. The war is going to end. I truly believe, based on a lot of research we've done here at the Media Line, there's going to be anti-Semitism even higher than where we are, which is hard to believe. That is really hard to fathom.
Yeah.
Because there's been this groundswell laid, and for whatever reason that is going to be used, and there'll be a bunch that I can think of, it's still against hate against the Jew. That's gone back for thousands of years.
Right.
And this is something that has been toxic, whether it's into the Muslim community and sometimes even within the church.
Sure, of course.
So how do you change that? What do you do today to change that pendulum for the next 100 years?
Yeah. Well, it's such an important question. People ask me a lot about my story and why in the world am I the Israel guy? Why am I here all the time? I
think you live here more than your home.
I grew up in an evangelical church that taught me that the Jews are God's chosen people and Israel is the Holy Land and the land of God's choice. And that was the ethos, that was the context I grew up in for years. What was the problem? I never met a Jew. I never met a Jew. The Jewish people existed as an idea. They existed as a concept. They existed as a point in my theology. But I'd never been to a Shabbat dinner. I'd never heard a rabbi teach from the Torah. I didn't know the story of Holocaust survivors. I'd never met a Jew. And so, to me, how do we fight anti-Semitism? The Jewish community as a whole, with every good reason, has many times throughout its history been an insulated community. Listen, live and let live, leave us alone, we'll leave you alone. And so there has kind of been that wall of, whatever you want to call it, separatism, because history has not treated the Jews well. But now, I could get emotional. I've had the privilege of bringing thousands of people here. And Felice, do you know, we've brought 35,000 people here over the past 30 years. We do surveys when people go back, and we say, what was your highlight of your trip? What was the one highlight? We're asking Christians. They don't say the Sea of Galilee, the boat. They don't say the Garden Tomb. They don't say, Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Overwhelmingly, I would say 90% plus, what do they say?
They met a Jew.
They met a Jew where? At Shabbat dinner. The Shabbat dinner for them is transformational. And so the answer to your question is, how do we fight anti-Semitism? We bridge the gap between Jew and Christian.
The Judeo-Christian relationship has had ups and downs. It's complex too. And yet it's at a very unusual time in history where there has been so much rapprochement between the two sides in understanding each other, in respecting each other. What was the tipping point?
It's a fantastic question. I think a lot of the tipping point is that Christians kept coming here. The first Intifada, the second Intifada. I was here on October 7th. I was here for the 12-day war with Iran. The fact that when the hotels were empty, Christians were still here. Evangelicals were still here. I think that spoke volumes. And I think you have to give credit to President Trump. I think the moving of the embassy was a line in the sand. It was a plumb line in history. And again, I'll never forget that New York Times article. I mean, I have never been torn apart. Like, I mean, just horrific things said about me. And yet, I think history has proven true. And the bottom line in that article was this. I said, peace must come through truth. If we don't have truth, we don't have a real peace. And the truth of it is, in any peace plan, in any dialogue, Jerusalem is going to stay as the capital of Israel. Is there an East Jerusalem, capital of the Palestinian state, etc.? That's all debated, but there's nothing where Jerusalem is not the capital of Israel. So the embassy should move, and America should have stopped. How many administrations delayed? So I think those were the twin tipping points. Trump moving the embassy, which really was strong. Trump has said, I believe, forgive me if I'm incorrect, I think he's gone on record saying that was more a gift to the evangelical community than to the Jewish community, because the evangelicals who wanted that. That and the fact that Christians kept coming in the intifadas, in the wars, I think that's the tipping point of history.
Pastor to pastor, Pastor Huckabee. And that's very, very interesting in and of itself,
Right.
where President Trump decided in the end to put a pastor in as the ambassador to represent the United States in Israel at a very unique and very difficult time.
Right.
He's been charged with many complex, again that word, because I think there's no other way sometimes to describe it. They're complicated, detailed issues that go down on all
Right.
sides. And this is a man who's gone to Egypt. This is a man who's gone into Gaza. This is a man who's been in Israel, and he is putting aside his own personal feelings for the sake of the United States. I'm sure you speak with him, and in looking at how you sell, and I'm going to use that word, this ceasefire to many who might believe that the only answer was take out Hamas, we might lose hostages, but that is the end, and you're going to get rid of Hamas because you are left with
Right.
Hamas at
Right.
the end of the day, possibly at some point re-ruling Gaza.
Well, how many times are we going to use the word complicated and complex in
but
this interview?
it's-
So you know, I've even seen today, right, in the news here in Israel, that there are some on the right or far right here in Israel who are not in favor of the deal that's been made, because thousands, as I understand, or 1,500 or something prisoners
Right.
who are, charged with crimes and many have blood on their hands are being released. But again, I go back to my earlier statement. Sometimes you have to choose between a bad situation and a less bad situation. This is not a perfect deal. This is not, that doesn't exist. This has been war. This has been bloodshed. This has been horror. And so I think you have to, I'll speak as a Christian, you have to get out of the boat and believe that you can walk on water. You have to do something out of the box and say, listen, this has to stop. Let's try this. And the genius of President Trump is that now the eyes of the whole world are on this. Turkey's been brought in. I understand Tony Blair has been brought back into this, okay? So the eyes of the whole world are involved in this decision. And both Israel and whatever is left of Hamas and Mahmoud Abbas and the Fatah leadership, the eyes of the whole world are going to be watching with great scrutiny to see, okay, the dust is settled. There's a moment here for us to look around and see who's really telling the truth here and what's really happening. And so I empathize with those who have fear that Iran or Hamas we're just kicking this can down the road for 3 more years and it's going to happen again. There's good reason to have fear for that. But I think that we have to choose between a situation that became untenable, that you could not live with anymore, and a solution that let's try this. And I do applaud the genius of this moment because I think it's necessary.
Look to the neighbors of Israel because it's iffy of what's going to go down with Lebanon. Still, we don't know. And the same thing with Syria. And here, Syria did not sign an agreement with Israel. There are Christians in these nations. They have not had it easy. There's been a lot of persecution over the years. When you, and you've been to some of these places yourself, when you go and you visit with Christians in the region, do you bring up you've been to Israel? Do you discuss the fact, they can look it online, but do you discuss the fact that Israel's part of the Middle East? It's not Israel and the Middle East, it's Israel as part of the Middle East.
Sure, yeah.
Can you?
Well, yeah, they kind of know who I am when I'm coming in, so that my reputation follows me in that sense. But I actively engage with the Muslim world wherever I can. I've had the privilege of being the guest of the president of Azerbaijan on 3 occasions. We've talked about this personally in the presidential palace in depth. I interact with Muslim clerics in New York City. Again, I go back to that earlier question of moving things from the abstract to the human. And we must humanize one another. We must have those, and sometimes the end of those conversations is, wow, we really disagree. But at least you know, and at least you tried. At least you made the effort. And by the way, I think that's how you gain credibility. You have to be in this for the long haul. You can't, peace and true change doesn't come easily. It's brick by brick. It's moment by moment. So I think there has to be, I had lunch recently with the great and amazing Melanie Phillips, the political commentator out of, formerly Great Britain. She lives here now and she's back and forth. And she said to me, she said, Bishop, there has to be a great global conversation. We really have to have a global conversation about what kind of future are we living in. Because very bizarrely, again, the far left cultural Marxists, it really has become a religion. It's really become a full mindset religion that terrifyingly, and I guess we shouldn't be surprised, this is the remnants of Stalin, this is the remnants of what we saw. It shuts down any sense of free speech, any sense of personal liberties, and that is in collusion now with radicalized Islam. And so Melanie said, we need a great global conversation about what is the future of the planet going to be. And that's where I'm committed. And I get a lot of flack for that. I have lunch and dinner and do interviews with people that the evangelical world would say, what are you doing, talking with them? And I get all the time, Felice, I'll post something about Islam. I'll say, but it's not radical Islam, it's all Islam. All Islam is bad. Listen, you have to meet people where they are. As a Christian, that's the story of my faith. God met us where we were in Jesus. So how can I not meet people where they are? I have to give every human being that chance and that opportunity for conversation. Again, honoring the image of God in each person.
On that note, years ago, I ran a press club between Israeli and Palestinian journalists. Brought over 200 together. It wouldn't happen today in Ramallah and here. And there were ministers that came together, and it was really around topics. And there was a window of opportunity in business, and you saw it. And right now, it's far away.
Yeah.
To rebuild those bridges will take many years. Do you feel the Christians would want to have an opportunity to partake in helping to rebuild bridges amongst Muslims that are interested in that kind of rapprochement and changing things in the region for the better.
Well, let me answer that question in two phases. One of the things I've been encouraged about in the 21-point plan that's come really, to me, harkens back to, and you know, I would call him a genius, but the genius of Shimon Peres. A lot of people found him, you know, too far to the left or said that he was an idealist. I had the privilege of knowing him personally. And he really believed that you could accomplish more peace through business than you could sometimes through military might or through, you know, standard diplomatic channels, because, you know, all people want a better life for themselves and for their children and their grandchildren. And so if you looked to focus on business opportunities in a greater region, he believed there was a path towards greater normalization in that way. So I like the fact that the president's plan seems to be starting with that, because I think there's opportunity there. Now, to the second part of your question, I wish and I hope that my evangelical brothers and sisters can get to the place of sitting down at a table, not only with the Jewish community, but with the Muslim community and with other faith communities. I'm going to India for the first time next month. You know, unfortunately, within evangelicalism, interfaith dialogue has a very bad name. And there's 100 reasons for that, but evangelical theology has not been broad-minded in contact and dialogue with other faith traditions. It's seen as compromise. I've taken a lot of heat and a lot of hits for that. But again, I look at Jesus. He's talking to the woman at the well. He's telling the story of the Good Samaritan. He's, you know, I mean, I see Jesus consistently reaching out to the other. And I go back to the Mosaic tradition, which is, how do you treat the stranger in your midst? So to me, these are biblical, moral mandates. And I pray that my small example will encourage other evangelical leaders to reach out beyond their box and to begin to engage not only the Jewish community. That's a great place to start, because that would be our first natural conversation, because you can't explain Christianity without Judaism. But then from that place, I hope, reach out to the broader community.
It's a day in a moment in time where people are reflecting on the trauma of what went down October 7th. It's a time in the history of Israel and the world where many hostages are going to be released, but there's trauma throughout the nation on so many levels. Do you see the trauma of what happens in Israel when you speak to your congregants, and are they feeling the trauma from here, there?
I think that our congregations certainly feel empathy. There's a strong place of empathy. I don't know yet that they would use the word trauma. Because again, I think we are in the early stages of this awakening where churches are really, truly taking a stand. There's a difference between saying you're taking... Listen, there was a situation recently where a pro-Israel conference was going to be held in America at a very pro-Israel church. And there were a lot of threats that were made and a lot of problems that were stirred up. And I have the greatest respect for this church. And I was not there. I can't say what did and did not happen. But the bottom line was the church chose not to hold this pro-Israel conference. You know, where do you stop giving up ground? Where do you stop ceding ground to that fear? So I don't think the church has felt trauma, but I think the church feels empathy and increasingly feels a level of, we've in our congregation, we regularly have Muslims showing up in our parking lot, taking photos of our people. We don't know what's going on with that, but we've had to report that to the police. Just driving around our parking lot randomly, taking photos of our buildings, etc. That's new for us. So, but I do feel that the Jewish community has a tremendous sense of trauma and corporate PTSD, and I think the rest of the world has to empathize with that. The Jewish community has had trauma for centuries, but certainly in this century has had unbelievable trauma. The Shoah, the Holocaust, all of the pain of the birth of Israel, and then a war in Israel every few years, ending in now October 7th. And all this is ceaseless trauma for a century. So I think that the world has to understand that Jewish particularity, the particular way, or I'm struggling to find the right word, but the way a Jewish person or a Jewish organization might approach something comes out of extraordinary historic trauma. And so you have to see that and recognize that.
Pastor Robert Stearns, thank you for taking time. Good luck on your next trip.
Thank you.
I'm sure you'll be back in Israel.
Next month.
And we'll talk then.
Thank you so much, Felice.
You're welcome.